And on this week's In Focus session, we'll be discussing why you need to start dropping your ego because it's messing up your stuff. So, before we jump into it, I want to let you know that this episode has been inspired by a conversation I was having in my DMs. Shout out the person who I was having that conversation with. You know who you are. I'm not going to name any names and I'm not going to share too much private stuff. I'm going to keep it confidential for obvious reasons. But I just want to let you guys know that I'm always having conversations with people in my DMs. And the reason that I create these episodes isn't so I can sit here and shout into my camera and my microphone. It's to create conversation with you. So if there's anything that you get from these episodes, if there's any questions that you have, if there's anything that I can help you with, then come and hit me up on Instagram at I'm Alex Manzi. Drop me a DM because I really love having these conversations because it sparks so many great ideas for me to share more episodes like this with people who can really benefit from them. Whereas if I'm not having those conversations, maybe those ideas aren't there. So just wanted to let you guys know that I'm here to create conversation with you. I'm not here to just talk at you and not get anything back. Like I want you guys to hit me up to let me know what you are learning from these episodes, questions you have, what I can help with, etc. So the reason that I want to talk about dropping your ego in this episode is because the conversation I was having this week was about how when you allow your ego to take over and your insecurities to take over, you tend to kind of project those things onto other people. And what happens is if you're saying, for example, the person I was talking to was saying that they don't really like a sense of arrogance from people. So when they try and shut that out from within themselves, what it does is it actually projects arrogance from themselves into other people, right? So they come off as arrogant to other people, and other people appear more arrogant to them. And it's a really interesting conversation because when that's happening, right, more often than not, and I've experienced this in my own life, is it's just a story that you have about yourself about why you don't want to be arrogant, right? And when you start from that place, you're naturally going to be either fighting that off and coming across more arrogant as the example, or you're going to want to push it away and run from it all the time, and therefore creating this kind of barrier of fear between you and becoming an arrogant person, right? But the truth is there's a little bit of arrogance inside all of us, right? And I've only really experienced this for myself recently. Like I used to really hate the idea of being someone who is arrogant. Like, I'm quite a modest person as it is. So I used to hate the idea of arrogance and like not necessarily showing off, but trying to come across like you know a lot and you know everything, right? And I'm not saying that's what I do now at all, but I'm a lot more tapped in and a lot more comfortable with the idea of there being little bits of arrogance within me every now and then, right? And that's not to say it's a bad thing, right? It doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just something that happens sometimes, right? And by taking the meaning out of it, that by taking the meaning out of what it means for me to be arrogant, then I'm not putting so much, giving so much power to the idea of it. Because when I'm really giving the power to it, that's when it takes more control and it takes more energy from me, right? Because I'm giving more energy to it, and this is why the ego that we have is very interesting because our ego is always trying to create these boundaries between us and the world around us and create this like bubble of safety, right? So if it doesn't like something, it's going to try and shut that thing off. But if we drop our ego for a second, if we just take our ego and put it to the side and say, look, we don't want to listen to you right now, you're talking nonsense, like what's actually going on, you'll see that anything that you're seeing across your life or in other people that you don't like, so arrogance or anger or frustration or short-tempered nature, what whatever it is, right? Insecurity, if you don't like seeing those things in other people, more often than not it's because your ego is telling you that it doesn't like that part of yourself. Whereas if you can see that actually, like, it's fine to have those moments and to have those traits. Like there's nothing wrong with it because if you're able to see that as just something that happens sometimes, it doesn't mean it's good, it doesn't mean it's bad, then the balance that you have within yourself will almost address itself, right? It will address itself to the point where your ego is put to the side, and actually you're like, okay, so that's like me showing a little bit of arrogance or a little bit of frustration, a little bit of anger, whatever. That's cool. That's just something that is an experience that I have every now and then. There's nothing wrong with it. But when you start to label things like good, bad, like positive, negative, right? There's a really big difference between coming from something and saying like, a feeling I'm having right now is bad. It's a really bad feeling, but let me find the positive in it, right? That there's a very big difference between that and coming from a place of almost neutrality, where you're like, nothing is either good or bad. It's just something that you experience. And then from that place, you can create the positive reality around it, right? It's a very different place. You're not coming from this place of like egocentric insecurity where you're like, oh no, I can't feel this thing because it's bad. So I need to now try and find the good. You're coming at it from a place of like, that's something that I've experienced. That's interesting. Okay, what's the positive thing I want to create from this? It's an entirely different space, and they're almost like poles apart. One's coming from a fear-based, insecure-based place within yourself, and the other one's coming from a place of abundance where it's like, oh, that's interesting. That's something that I've experienced. Let me explore that and let's see what I can create using, what I've learned from that. It's a very different approach. One's the growth mindset and one's the fixed mindset. One's scarcity, one's abundance. One is fear. One is I don't even know what the opposite to fear would be. Like just courage, I guess, right? Courage to take your life forward and to learn. And it's really important because if we allow the ego to really take over the way and the things that we do in our life, and to dictate to us things that are good and things that are bad, or things that we should feel and things that we shouldn't feel, we're coming from that insecurity that the ego is telling us that it doesn't want. We're actually coming from that place within us. We're creating more of it in our life because we're coming from that place. We're giving out insecurity, therefore we're receiving more of it back. Whereas if you're coming from a place of like abundance, and you can see that actually these are areas and rooms in your life, and areas to grow from and to learn from and create something positive from it, then you're coming from an entirely different space. And that's a far more powerful space to create change in your life than doing it out of a place of fear and insecurity. If you're doing it from a place of like willing and choosing to do it and abundance, the growth that you're going to experience is going to be exponential compared to the growth that you're going to experience if you're coming from a fearful place. And the experience of it is probably going to be a lot more fun. Like, I remember when I was trying to fight off like all of these demons that I had in my life, like facing anxiety and depression and stuff like that. When I was fighting it off, it was a horrible experience. It was an exhausting experience because all I was ever doing was trying to battle with this idea of like being depressed, not being depressed, being depressed, not being depressed, good, bad, this is positive, that's negative. And it was just exhausting trying to fight between the two. But when I dropped the idea of like it being a positive or negative thing, I was really open to create a real, true, deep, positive change in my life, because I understood that what I was feeling in that moment didn't mean anything to me other than it was an experience that I was having right then. And from that place, I could be like, that's very interesting. What can I learn from that? And what do I choose to change from what I've learned? What can I create moving forward? And that is such a powerful place to come from in your life. And I'd like to invite you to think about, what are the areas in your life that you have that you're holding yourself back on in those ways? What are the areas in your life that your ego is dictating to you that is either good or bad, or that you need to change, or that you don't like about yourself? Because they're the areas where you need to drop the ego and become more accepting of them, see the learnings in it, and then choose to create the growth that you want. And I'd love to hear what those things are. I'd love to hear if this episode has resonated with you. I'd love to hear if there's anything you've learned from this episode, or what the biggest learning that you've made from this episode is. To do so, like I said, hit me up on Instagram at I'm Alex Manzi. My DMs are always open. I'm always having conversations with people, and I love connecting with you guys on there because, like I said, I created this podcast to create conversations, not to just shout down the microphone and the camera. So please hit me up with your learnings from this episode. I'd love to hear what they are. I'd love to hear what you got from it. And if there's someone that you think would really benefit from hearing this episode, then be sure to send it to them. Send them the link, send them a screenshot, because it's really important that we continue to spread the episode like this and the positive vibes of episodes like this. You know, I created this podcast to start creating and inspiring a positive change in people, and you can be a part of that by sharing it with someone you know today. And I want to thank you, as always, for spending time with me today, and I will see you for the next episode.